Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education that allows you to accomplish your dreams and your aspirations. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, May 23rd, and welcome to episode number 69, What You Need to Know About College Interviews. In this week's news, non-degree badges are booming, but are they useful? And we're in chapter 69 of 171 answers, and Mark is talking us through what your child needs to know about college admissions interviews. And this week's question is from a mom who wants to know if she can be refunded for SAT or ACT tests if her child no longer needs to take the test. And Mark continues his interview with Mr. Yancie Davis in part 2 of using non-cognitive variables in the admissions process.
I'm getting excited, Anika. I'm about to take a big trip to Minnesota. Yep. I'm going to be visiting 5 colleges: St. Olaf, Carleton, Macalester, Bethel,
Goodness.
and the University of Minnesota. And I will be attending my niece's graduation. So all of that. And Mr. Yancie Davis, who is on our interviews, I'll be meeting him. So getting together with Yancie. So
nice.
Super excited. So I'll be on the road from the 22nd to the 26th. But you got a lot going on too. You got a big graduation week coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, by the time this airs, Mark, my child will be an official graduate of Davidson College.
We'll both be parents of alum from Davidson. No more tuition checks.
And the day before John Andrew turns 11. So let me just go ahead and shout out John Andrew. Happy birthday.
I love it. Well, we're doing our countdowns. And we are on number 8.
Mm-hmm.
And for you first-time listeners, we do these countdowns. And Anika's hearing it for the first time. We get her commentary. And this one, we are looking at the fastest-growing jobs that pay at least $75,000 or more. So this one is number 8. It's actually tied for 8. So we'll have another one that'll be 8 next week as well, with a projected growth rate of 28% between 2016 and 2026. And it is an information security analyst. The median pay is, I know these big fancy names. The median pay is $95,510. And what do? They plan and carry out security measures to protect an organization's computer networks and systems. Their responsibilities are continually expanding as the number of cyber attacks increase. So most of them work for computer companies or consulting firms or businesses or financial companies. And if someone wants to become an information security analyst, then it requires a bachelor's degree in a computer-related field. And then usually employers like to hire analysts with experience in the related occupation. So $98,530 was the median income for May of 2018. So I'm sure that's a year ago. It's probably 6 figures now. What do you think, Anika?
I think this is a good time to get John Andrew plugged into Your College Bound Kid.
You're going to plan away that little 11-year-old's life.
I asked him again the other day where he wanted to be. He's like, how am I supposed to know? Leave me alone.
He gave you a good answer. And his dad would have agreed.
Just turn this on in the car.
His dad would have agreed with him.
Turn this on in the car.
His dad would have agreed with him. I know what Javon was thinking.
Time to start, Dawn.
Well, at least you didn't. I like that answer better than you going back to math and Janae again and trying to get her into IT or something.
I got a distraction there. Lucky you, Nene. John is up.
That's all good. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, this week's article is entitled, Non-Degree Badges Are Booming. Are They Useful? And this is found in the Hechinger Report, and I got it pronounced correctly this time.
The first time.
First time, and I'll take that. It's written by Mr. Matt, I think it's Krupnick or Mr. Matt Krupnick. Matt, please pardon moi. And while there is a general consensus on what a college degree represents, there is confusion over these new online credentials and if they are useful to employers and job seekers. And he's talking about these badges, these online badges where you can go and take a course, get in a certain skill, and you get like a digital badge almost, and something that you can pad your resume with. And I'll tell you, Mark, I've seen those and they do look a little attractive. So I want to know before I spend some money if I need to go into this. So what he's saying is that not hundreds, but thousands of credential classes have been born to improve specific skill sets. And one thing that was most interesting to me in this is that he cites how colleges have responded to it, how to this boom, and how they're adding non-degree programs of their own. Wow, did not know that. And so the big question, I believe, Mark, around this is around the regulatory body that monitors all of these certifications. So I'm confident that there are some out there that are up and running that's messing it up for all the other ones who are actually legit. And another thing that Matt cites in here is that the one big problem with these certificates or badges or whatever we want to call it is that employers can't always interpret what they mean. And so back in the day when training and development was a big thing that employers provided, that's not the case so much anymore. And this is the void that a lot of these, these certificates / badges are trying to fill. So again, Mark, I say I've seen these. I'm tempted to take a couple of them. Tell me, what should I do? How should I spend my money?
Well, I think overall, I have a positive view of badges. But let's give a little background. So we've done quite a few segments in the past, Anika, discussing why is it that so many colleges are struggling to survive? Why is it so many are finding enrollment to be such a real challenge? And we've talked about various reasons for this. We've talked about international enrollment being on decline. We did a whole segment or two on that. We've talked about the plight that rural colleges face. We've talked about the rise of online competitors, degrees. And we've talked about how the global financial crisis has caused many people to question the value of a degree, especially when loans are at an all-time high and a higher percentage of people than the past were not getting jobs after, 2008. And so that had caused people to question, do I really need this 4-year residential experience? So it's against that backdrop that some people were saying, well, education is important. So ongoing education is really, really important. But maybe there's a way we can get at some of that without having to have the 4-year residential experience. It's also compounded by the fact that adults are changing professions more than ever. Back in the day, you go get a job and you work at the same company for 40 years, 45 years, get your pension and retire, right? Now, people are having 6 to 8 different distinct careers that require additional training. And then people want to work from home more. I'm myself and some of my colleagues at KIP, Anika, we met with the president from Clark Atlanta last week. And she's been an educator for over 50 years. And she was just talking with us about how young people have changed from when she first started in education. And a couple of things that she pointed out was that they want to be entrepreneurs. They don't want to go work for somebody. Now they want to work for themselves. And the other thing she said is they don't want to clock in at office. She said, I feel guilty. If I'm not here in the office, I was returning emails at 10 o'clock last night. She's like, no, I want to work from home. So these badges are a response to a demand in the workforce. Also, another factor is that a lot of times employers feel like colleges aren't always providing them with the skill set that their employees need. They might have a basic general background and knowledge, and they like the fact that the college degree indicates something about your grit and your perseverance, and it lets them know you're halfway intelligent. But you're still coming in and lacking a lot of the skills. And then another point you mentioned, which is companies cutting back on training and development. So I'm going to read one quote from the article that I liked. And this is what it said. It says training and development are often the first place employers are forced to cut. There are a lot of conversations about what we can do to develop the workforce. Not all the new courses are aimed at increasing clearly defined skills in manufacturing or computing. Employers report trouble finding job candidates who can communicate well in teams, which is among the reasons George Mason University administrators say they started the Resilience Badge class in 2015. Students can choose to take the 5-week course, 3 weeks in the classroom, and 2 weeks online to improve their ability to face adversity and work with others, said Lewis Forrest, George Mason's Associate Dean of University Life. Forrest notified the disconnect between what students generally learn in college and what employers need, and said this badge could help them with that. I want to repeat that because I think that line's important. Forrest, George Mason's Associate Dean for University Life, noted there's a disconnect often between what students generally learn in college and what employers need, and this badge could help them with that. But only if employers understand what it means when they see it on a job candidate's resume. So, the answer is, it's kind of like saying, can you get a good education in college? Well, which college, right? Most, yes, not all. So we can't generically, broad stroke of the brush, say all badges are good. We can't say all badges are bad. But what we can say is that they are a response to a need. And the need is that employers are finding their employees have gaps in their training. So they come up with these. Another term. Did you catch the other for badges, Anika? There's another term that's used.
It wasn't certification, was it?
No, it's microcredentials.
Oh.
So a lot of times they're referred to as, microcredentials, badges, microcredentials, which are different from macrocredentials, kind of a couple of different terms you'll hear used. So they're a little short because, and the difference now, a certification is more of a macrocredential, by the way.
Okay.
By the way, I thought that was going to be a question for me because I'm getting good at predicting your questions. I thought you were going to be, here it is, Mark. What's the difference between a badge and a certification? I had it all teed up and all ready for you, by the way. But so the question, so you asked your question, should you get a badge? It's going to depend. I would say the first thing that I would say is it addressing an area that you need assistance in? Is it addressing an area that you feel would either help your personal growth or make you more marketable or more effective at your job? And then you want to try to do a little digging to find out, what's the track record of that particular, whether it's a college or it's an organization that's doing it. I think the fact that colleges are starting to offer it is sort of like, if you can't beat them, join them, right? It's kind of like,
right.
It's kind of like colleges at one time had real pushback against people that were going with online schools and online. Then they started adding their own online courses.
Right.
So the fact that the colleges are getting in the game indicates that they know that there's a need and they're trying to respond to the need.
Yep. Well, and I'm gonna tell you one thing too, because I was thinking about, I want to take a WordPress or I want to take a, something technical. But it reminded me of those courses of, like you say, working well with other people, like general communication skills, how to overcome adversity. And so those things, if you think about it, aren't offered in the traditional college courses. It's all about the technical and the subject, the direct, whatever, core subject matter, whatever you call those things. So those are really beneficial. And it just reminded me about this lynda.com class I need to go back to that I haven't finished doing. It's like a personal branding something. Yeah. So I see a lot of benefit in a lot of those. So I might spend a little money, but I do get some access to some stuff. So that makes me happy.
No, I think they're really good because I think there's these little niche needs out there. It could be even something like becoming an Excel expert, right? Or there's stuff learning how to program. I mean, there's so many of them, that are out there. But I do think a lot of our listeners may be wondering, what is the difference between a badge and a certification, because that's a common question. And so it was a great answer to that by Mickey Rops, who writes for Association and Trends, and they have a lot of cutting edge content. And so this is what Mickey said about the difference. He says, according to ROPS, a macro credential covers the breadth of a profession. For instance, the Certified Association Executive of the American Society of Association Executives will test the certification candidate on the full scope of the management profession, from finances to government to volunteer leadership and on, versus the small-scale learning programs that target very specific areas of profession, which would be the microcredential or badges. Does that explain it?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So are you going broad, big picture, comprehensive? That's more the certification macrocredential. Or are you going these short little mini course, oftentimes online compared to face-to-face? And they can be very, very practical for the adult professional. Like you're a adult working professional. You're not going back to live on campus on a dorm and do something that takes all day in the middle of the day. Like you need something that you can maybe do an hour or two, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, or maybe even one day a week.
That's right.
And work from home.
I'm doing it.
So I'm a big advocate of badges. However, they have become a threat to some degree to degree programs, and I like them in addition to, right, as supplementing.
Right, of course.
But let's say you've got the high school dropout, they got their GED, and now they're in the workforce, and they can't go. It's really hard for them to go back to college. Nothing's wrong with just upgrading your skills. You don't always have to get the 4-year degree to make yourself marketable.
That's right. Absolutely. Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, we are in chapter 69, and we are looking at interviews. What role they play in college admissions? What were your takeaways from this chapter of my book?
Well, let's talk about the distinction between the two, I guess, primary types, or the only types. Either you're being evaluated or they're informational interviews. And I don't know, I feel like you're always being evaluated. No matter whatever you tell, I always tell Janae and Jayla, you are all Johnny on the spot. Spotlight is on you. I don't care if you just walk them through the office, notice somebody's looking at you. But yeah, just that. And the big point that you make in this is that how do you determine which one you're doing? Are you being evaluated, or is it just an information session for you? And the first point is to ask. Just darn it, ask the people, what are you about to get yourself into? My first question for you, Mark, because I have a couple in here, where you talk about how, like, there are some kids that get interviewed and some don't. How does that work? And how do they know who they're going to interview? And like, how does that whole process work? I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I just assumed that it was an all or nothing thing.
No. So let me ask that, but let me also just take a step back, because I think some people may still not be following us on information versus evaluative. I know it sounds really self-explanatory, but I think this is familiar content to you, maybe not to everybody. So when we say informational, what that means is a lot of colleges use interviews as a way to do multiple things. One, keep their alumni engaged. Two, diminish the questions that get asked to the admission office. So it decreases their need for more staff. Three, it makes the whole office seem very, very personable and approachable. Like I've got a chance to have a one-on-one sit down with somebody who can answer a lot of questions without having to pay for it. Because all these programs are almost always free. There's almost always volunteer labor for interviews. So all of those are benefits. Furthermore, admissions officers are trying to yield the student. So if they meet somebody who they relate to and they get along with, then that has a tendency to increase the student's interest in the school. I've seen this, Anika, where students come back to me and they talk about, I just love my interview. We talk forever, and it can spike up their interest in the school. In those cases, though, it is not counting as a means by which you are being evaluated. I do agree it's wise to assume it's being evaluated. Like, have that mindset. Don't feel like, it's only an information interview, so I'm sloughing off. I'm coming 30 minutes late, ripped jeans, baggy pants, got my headphones on, whatever, not brushing my teeth, we could go on and on. So I just want to make that clear, where the evaluative interview is very, very important. It's similar to things like your teacher recommendations and your extracurriculars and your essays, in terms of really getting a sense of who you are as a person, and those notes go into the file. And so those are the two biggest differences. And one thing that people can get confused by is you can't tell by who's doing the interview whether it's informational or evaluative.
One tell whether an interview is evaluative is that the actual admission officer is doing the interview. The time an AO has to spend is so precious that if an AO is actually doing the interview, I would consider to be evaluative, even if they don't say that it is. And I would also regard it as something that failing to do will likely not be in your best interest. In general, I do find that colleges are not clandestine when it comes to whether an interview is evaluative or informational. They will shoot straight with you. Remember, though, your go-to source is going to be the admissions section of their website.
So if you think, oh, wow, it's just an alumni. No, most of the time, most of the interviews are done by alumni, but sometimes they're done by actual admissions officers, and sometimes they're done by senior fellows. You know what a senior fellow is, Anika?
Kind of, sorta.
Take a stab at it.
There's a fellowship program, so it's something that they apply to. I know that. And what they do, I don't know. Go ahead and take it away.
I could tell you're trying to bluff your way out of this one, and I was not going for the okie doke.
I know there's a process.
Yeah, that's all you do. I was just going to sit back and let you spin your wheels and see. It's okay. Most people don't know what it is, so it's not a bad question. So what happens is students who volunteer in the admission office, they usually start out as tour guides. And then a lot of times they may become like tour guide leaders. And then every school will have a few senior people who will be students who will be like the leaders of the leaders, right? And so oftentimes, not always, these are people who want an admissions career, because I have seen people be very, very, so like if someone comes to me and says, I want to work in an admissions office, you know what I'm going to tell? Become a tour guide, work your way up, and see if they have a senior fellow program. Because I have seen one of my own former students, Anika, that's how she got her admission job. She was a senior fellow, and she actually they never had an opening at the school. But of course, the dean of admission knows everybody in the world. All he had to do is put the word out to his colleagues, like, this person's fantastic. If you have an opening, scoop her up. And that's what happened. So they just have a lot of responsibility. And a lot of times they will interview. So you can't tell, because a senior fellow could do an evaluative interview, because sometimes senior fellows even get to sit in on committee. So they can be given a lot of responsibility. So anyway, I don't even think I answered your question yet. What did you ask me?
Not yet. What did you ask me? You did not.
What did you ask me?
Is the fact that not all students are interviewed.
Yes. Yeah. So think about it. So what happens in order to have an interview program? Remember, people are coming from all around the world, and you can't ask. Let's assume it's alumni, because alumni normally do them. You can't expect alumni to drive 5 hours to meet a kid. It's just not realistic, right? You can't expect a student to drive 5 hours either. Now, increasingly, more of them are being done by Zoom and video conferencing, that kind of thing.
I'm going to be interviewing the CEO on our podcast of a very exciting new company called Zeme, and they're bringing the student video interview directly to admission counselors.
But the in-face interview, what they do is they try their best to have people, but they don't have full coverage. So sometimes people don't get interviews because they live in remote areas. Sometimes they don't get interviews because they're a little bit later when they complete their file compared to the timeline of when the interviews are assigned. So there are a lot of reasons why it happens. Now, schools that do evaluative interviews, they will try really, really hard to have full coverage. But even there's some things that are a little different. Like, I know schools that do expect you to interview if you live within a 150-mile radius. They expect you to. And if you don't, then they don't. So there's a lot of different models out there. But the bottom line is, school tries its best to have full coverage, but most of the time you'll see print in there that it won't be held against you if you didn't have one. But if it's evaluative, they're going to look at whether you made the initiative, whether you did everything that you were supposed to do from a responsibility standpoint. So case in point, one of my students last year, Nick, who's in a more remote part of Connecticut, he requested an interview from Washington University in St. Louis. And they said to him, unfortunately, we do not have anybody in your area, but it will be noted in your file that you requested one. So it can factor into demonstrated interest as well. Does that make sense? Did I answer it or not this time?
Yeah, no, it does, actually. Thank you. We would like to thank every listener who has financially supported our show.
We want to make sure that our friends of the show know that you absolutely can make a one-time gift, or you can sign up for one of our monthly giving levels. Recently, we received a lovely letter from a college counselor who made a gift and said she wants to support the show quarterly, and that is also okay.
And if you make a one-time gift or a quarterly gift, you may still be entitled to the same benefits we extend to our monthly donors.
That's right. For a gift of $60 or more within the first 12 months, you'll get all the benefits we provide in our Sustainer plan. And a gift of $120 or more in the first 12 months, and you'll get all the benefits we offer in our Expander plan.
So to support the show, all you have to do is go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. Either click the monthly gift tab or the one-time gift tab.
And be sure to visit our frequently asked question page, which is also located at yourcollegeboundkid.com for more details. This is also where you can learn about the Sustainer plan and the Enhancer plan.
Your financial support helps us defray the sizable expenses that it takes to deliver all of this great content that is aimed to empower you and your family's college admissions journey.
Different people have different abilities to give, but whatever you can contribute will be greatly appreciated, and it will allow us to remain commercial free. So thank you in advance.
Thank you.
I think we should share a little bit about what to do in an interview. I think that's important. Do you remember anything I said in the chapter on that?
Well, yeah, some of the stuff I've done recently in my career.
Oh,
that
good.
is to research and prep.
Yeah.
Ask the right questions, show genuine interest, put a little personality in there, all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Research, prepare, and come with really good questions. And whatever you do, don't say I don't have any questions. You know, and then another thing, be yourself. Be yourself.
Yeah.
Be yourself. You know, be who you are. Do you? But you know, one of the questions people ask is how do you dress? And that's a little tricky to say precisely. I think business casual is a kind of a safe way to go. But a little part of it depends on who you are as a person, and part of it depends a little bit on the school as well. The more formal the school is, the more I would kind of spiff it up a little bit. But at the same time, you kind of want to find that balance between showing respect for the occasion and no tuxedos, please. Please, no tuxedos, no wedding garb.
That is
here.
Not the occasion, by the way.
Yes, exactly. You want to show, but you want to show a little respect for the occasion, but at the same time, you kind of want to do it within who you are as well. So I'm not completely comfortable.
But that's pretty. I don't know. That seems odd that you would say that, because I would assume that any interview would just be business. Like, why would you not be automatically prepared to dress in business attire?
These tend to these
like, I don't know. Business casual just seems so risky.
Yeah,
to me.
These are usually pretty casual events. This is hey, let's meet at a Starbucks. Let's, you know what I mean? They're pretty casual. And they're more, they're like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, and one of the things that they try to stress a lot is we're just having a conversation. You know, we're just having a conversation.
See, I just assumed that we were always reporting to the office of the dean and the whatever.
No.
Not always that.
No. Almost, probably 98% of these are not on campus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're. So this is the kind of scenario. Let's just make this up. So you live in Peoria, Illinois, okay, and you are applying to the University of San Diego, okay, and so you're not in San Diego, and so they look and see what alumni they have in their area, and then the alumni reach. Oh, there's another important thing we need to mention. This is very important. You really need to read the fine print on the website. You need to know. Is it your job to reach out to them and to request your interview, or will somebody contact you? And please be checking your emails, because I have seen people miss them because they, weren't checking their emails or went to spam. All that stuff happens.
Spam, our best friend. Yeah.
I think I'm spammed out on interview talk. I mean, very few schools have evaluative interviews, Anika, but for those who do, it is important to them. It is for those
Right.
because it just
Okay.
requires so much manpower. Like you look at some of the big programs in the country, like Georgetown loves their interviews, MIT loves their interviews, Brown, Harvard, these are some schools that love their interviews. It's a lot of manpower, and you can typically tell, but based on what percentage of students get an interview, how important it is. But most of the time, the websites will tell you. Most of the time, the websites will tell you, like if it's.
I have a question
Yeah,
for you.
go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So I was going to ask you, would an informational interview at any school be considered demonstrated interest? I suppose, right?
Yeah, it's gonna.
If you're asking for one.
Yeah, it's gonna be. It is an indication of demonstrated interest because people that aren't that, just kind of adding that school on, they oftentimes won't do that. They got other schools they're thinking about. Don't get me wrong. Not every. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. Like some schools are putting a lot more emphasis on DI than others are. But for those that look at DI, which is a lot of your private schools, especially in the modestly to somewhat selective, not necessarily the most selective, those schools just they do it in different ways, but not in similar. They're not looking at stuff like this as much. It can be a definite factor. There's no question about it. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark. Our question comes from Miss Goodson, who's in the ATL, Atlanta.
Hey.
And her question is, can I get a refund if I sign up for the SAT or the ACT and I no longer need to take the test? Can I just get my money back, please?
Oh, boy. This is one of these ones where you're going to start to see my blood boil, Anika.
Oh, why?
Because I don't like how the ACT or the SAT handle their business with this stuff. Neither one of them.
Oh.
They're both bad, in my opinion. So basically, the way it works is, let's start. Well, they're slightly different. So we can't just paint them exactly with the same stroke of the brush, but they're not too different. So let's talk about your options. For the SAT, if you cancel more than 5 days before, then you can get some of your money back. Guess how much money you get back, Anika?
$2.
Just like 10. Come on, they can't be that insulting.
Yes, they can, but
yeah, you're right. They can. They give you $10 back. $10.
Are you serious?
Yes, that's what you get if you cancel. If you cancel inside 5 days, see ya. So that's the first thing. I just think that's being cheap on their part and exploitive. I don't like it. So yeah, refunds take usually about 6 weeks to process. And also when it comes to score reports, they have different policies as well on whether or not you get that money back if you paid for extra score reports. Now there's some additional things that can come into play as well. So if you change, this is more common than canceling, right? You decide, this happens quite a bit. Like you sign up for May, you realize, oh, that's not going to work. I've got a basketball game, blah, blah, blah. That's prom, you know what I mean? Whatever, right? That's the more common. There's like a $30 change fee. But the reason why that bothers me, like somebody might be thinking, well, $30 doesn't sound that much. The test is $49.50. The test is $49.50. So when you're talking about $30 change fee, you're talking about more than 50% of the cost of the test. So to me, that's a pretty big chunk they're asking for you to pay again. I'm not saying most people $30 is going to break the bank, but still, it's just when you look at their policies, you can see the money-making engine that they are. Like another thing, $30 for late registration fee. So you might think, well, you shouldn't be late. You shouldn't be late. Well, they ask you to sign up quite a bit in advance, way more in advance than they need to have you sign up. So to me, that's a little bit of a gimmick. So get the $30 fee. Then sometimes they will give you an opportunity. You can be on the wait list and you have to show up, and you may get in, you may not get in. There is like $53. So there's a lot of these little fees built in, and then with the ACT, it's non-refundable. They don't even have that 5-day policy. They're $50.50. By the way, I didn't count if you take the writing test. The writing is like another $15 for the SAT, similar amount for the ACT. It's like $16.50 more for the ACT if you take it with writing. So there's all these little fees that they have in here. Test option change fee, change report fee. So so the bottom line to the question is, can you get a refund with the SAT? Barely, $10. ACT, no, and there are a lot of change fees. So just try your best when don't just willy-nilly just pick a date. Like, try to put some thought into really looking at things. Sure, it's not going to break the bank for most people, but the question came in and I wanted to answer it. What do you think?
Well, you totally threw me off because I thought you were going to say, Miss Gibson, don't be silly. Of course you can't get refunded. Like, I just...
Oh, really?
I was not.
Oh, really? So you thought
any of that.
So,
no.
Really? Oh, so that was a better policy than you thought?
I mean, I'm mad now. That you say, like, how dare they?
Because there's a lot. Well, I mean,
like, no, you're not gonna get refunded. Of course not. That was just, I don't know. I am mad now though, for real. Like, I wasn't expecting that.
It's so part of exasperation you're seeing to me is just the whole money-making industry that the College Board is in general.
Right.
Like, remember, the College Board administers the AP exam, right? Like, basically $100 a pop to take an AP exam. Then you've got the CSS profile charges there. Remember, after your free test reports, you got to pay for every single college to have your scores sent to. So, you get your scores back. You may think, well, so it starts out at 49, but you tried to sign up 3 weeks before, throw in this fee, that fee. Then you want to send your scores off to 10, 12 schools. And you know what I mean? So and I know how much they pay their employees, and I mean, they get away with being a nonprofit, but, well, as many people have told me, nonprofit is not anything about how much money they make. It's about a business structure. They sure prove that. But I just think that they're a monopoly, and they take advantage of the fact that I'll give you another example, Anika. So the writing portion of the SAT, virtually nobody asks for that anymore. I mean, I think a day or two ago I mentioned a couple weeks ago when we recorded, maybe a couple episodes ago, I told you I was just coming back from an event with Washington University in St. Louis, UVA, University of Virginia, Emory, Notre Dame, and Johns Hopkins. And remember I told you they took like 30 counselors to Maggiano's and gave us a nice lunch? So one of the counselors asked the question, do you guys take the writing? Everybody, do you guys ask for the writing? No, 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 and no. So these are all highly selective schools. None of them are looking at the writing. But yet, take a look at the percentage of people that sign up for the writing. That's why, because they kind of can give the impression that you may want to take that test. And so they make a lot more money off of it. And it's not even being used anymore, unless you're in California. Some of the California schools still like it. But other than that, pretty much nobody's even asking for the writing anymore. Yet they make a boatload of money off that. Like, they could easily have that on their website, right? Like, here's the list of schools they could easily have that on their website. Like, these are the very few schools that require the writing. I think it's down to 12 schools now in the whole country. They can have those up there, and they could say, unless you're applying to those, don't sign up for writing. But I've seen the statistics that the number of people that sign up for the test with writing, it's high. It's high.
Yeah.
So that's so when you see my ire, like, understand it's the bigger context of all the ways in which I feel like the College Board and the ACT just screw people over financially and just go deep into your pocket when they don't need to do it.
Another thing that agitates me that the College Board is responsible for is their waiver policy. They have waivers to cover the cost of the test for real low-income kids, but they're so parsimonious far too often when it comes to how hard they make it to get this waiver. For example, their income cutoffs are way too low. A family could make $50,000 and the College Board would say, you make too much money. It's not a hardship for you to pay for this. the ACT is equally as insensitive.
I'm with you now. Right there with you.
Boom, like you said last week.
Boom, for real. Hot. Dare they?
Okay, friends. If you missed part 1 of my interview with Yancie Davis, he's taken on a topic that very few people know about, and that is non-cognitive variables. What are they, and how are they used in the admission process? So he continues in part 2, and he looks at 2 other non-cognitive variables that we haven't discussed yet. And he talks about what makes these compelling. He goes on and he talks about how admission officers are being trained to implement these non-cognitive variables. He talks about the questionnaire that some people use and don't use. He talks about, and this gets really interesting, the controversy around non-cognitive variables, because he talks about the opposing views and why some people think it's a bunch of bunk and a bunch of hogwash. And then he talks specifically about why using non-cognitive variables is important in many instances when reading admission files for women. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
If you've got a sea of A's and a sea of strong curriculum, and pretty much everybody's got test scores that your research indicates they can be successful here, like, how are you going to differentiate, right? You need to go to some other factors.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the third variable. Understands and knows how to handle the system. So positive self-concept and realistic self-appraisal are pretty self-explanatory. What does understand and knows how to handle the system mean, and what are the cues and clues you look for to gauge this?
Absolutely. So when we talk about this concept of understanding and knowing how to handle the system, it's talking about a student being able to exhibit a realistic view of the system based upon kind of like their personal experiences, and is that student committed to improving the existing system. So it kind of is about a student taking an assertive approach to dealing with the existing wrongs that we have in our society, but is also not hostile, or they're not, when we're referring to these different wrongs within the system, that they're not using these, kind of like inherent wrongs as a cop-out. So, kind of, I think, boiling it down to its essence, that we're talking about, handling the different, kind of isms that might exist out there. We know that racism is a system that exists, that sexism is a system that exists out there. And so how is a student aware that these things are even existing, kind of like out there? And are they doing things that like allow them to be able to kind of like work through or within that system? And we might get information about this from the student's essay. A counselor's letter of recommendation might also kind of like let us know about a student being able to kind of like handle the system around them as well. So I think it's really just speaking to that idea of just being able to just be aware of the society in which we're in and being able to articulate that in an application.
So this one still feels a tad bit arcane and theoretical. So just to get a little bit more specificity, when you're talking about the system, it sounds like you're defining it more as society at large rather than navigating your way through the college admission campus. It sounds like you're not referring to demonstrating the skills to excel on the college campus, but more in society at large. Or is it both? Is it a both and there?
It is a both and, because I think if a student is able to express that they're able to do that in the high school side, that gives us that kind of it gives us the comfort of knowing that student will have the ability to be able to handle that once they get to a college campus. And, generally knowing that college campuses tend to be, definitely a more structured system because they're larger institutions that have different offices and departments. They're going to have to start to be able to like select classes, and work with like housing, all these different things that are kind of like coming to play. Showing that they've had the ability or the awareness that systems even exist on the front end gives us that confidence of knowing that the student might have the ability to be able to handle that on the back end when they come to our campuses.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes sense that it would be both and. Good. That's great. So the fourth variable is prefers long range to short term or immediate needs. What are your cues or clues that a student possesses this, and what exactly do you mean by prefers long range to short term or immediate needs?
Absolutely. So I think definitely just refers to a student being able to plan ahead and set goals for themselves. So basically, are able to respond to that deferred gratification. We know that college is great, and when you're having fun, that it feels like it might be the best 4 years, and it goes by too quickly. But as a college student, when you're in the middle of it, it also feels like the longest 4 years, because there's going to be so many things that go on as well, and the work that you have to put into to either pass that test or get the degree that you're going to get, that it takes time to get to that. And so I think a student being able to show in their application that they're able to to do that is always going to be a plus. So we might see this in essays, again, letters of recommendation, but also their extracurricular activities list. So maybe in their time that if they're doing activities, if they're not just doing it for 1 year to do that, but these are things that they have worked on over time. They might be part of, for example, maybe they're part of Model UN, United Nations, and they talk about how they've kind of like built up the program, or have maybe what they started to do in their freshman year being a part of the program, or what they eventually ended up doing by the time that they reached their senior year, just showing that trajectory of kind of like goals that they set over time, as opposed to, I wanted to do this one thing, it happened right there, and that was it. That again, it shows that when a student does have some barriers placed in front of them, that they're able to set a course ahead, or how are they going to get over or through that barrier to get to the goals in which they have for themselves.
Nice. So before we talk about the last four, Yancie, I know in conversations with you, you've talked about how admissions officers are being trained to look for and use these non-cognitive variables. What does that look like? Is that incorporated into an orientation process for new admission officers? And is that something that Stanford did? Are other colleges doing this? What can you tell us about training? Because this isn't something that I think even an experienced admission officer, depending on where they're coming from, may or may not have been doing this. I'm sure they're doing some of it, because everybody learns that some of these intangibles matter if they're doing holistic admissions, particularly.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 69 is the website campusreal.org. Now, Campus Real prides itself on being the YouTube for college admissions. Students give their perspective of what they like and what they don't like about their college experience. They also discuss any unique aspects of their college or university. Now, I commend any attempt to get a more natural understanding of what campus life is really like, to cut through all the marketing. Campus Real still needs to add more colleges, and they could use some upgrades to their website. They could also use some more quality control on the volume settings for some of their videos. But I like where this website is going. And over the next 18 months, I expect a whole different place from where they are right now. They're adding more colleges and more videos every month. I still recommend you check them out now, but YouTube will continue to be a primary source as they have more videos, at least for now. But it's nice to have something that is exclusively for college, that takes you beyond college marketing and the statistical information. And I hope next year to have one of the founders, a couple sharp, ambitious guys, on the podcast for an interview. Before we turn things back over to my interview with Yancie, I do want you to know that the SAT's Adversity Score Index was released just after we recorded this episode, and Anika and I will be sure to have a lot to say about this on episode 70. Now I return to my interview with Yancie Davis on non-cognitive variables and how they're used in the admission process. What can you tell me about how admissions officers are being trained to look for these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's definitely a function. I think as admissions officers, our training is ongoing. I think if you think about admissions officer who maybe has been in the field for 20 years, to think about the different kind of like generations or waves of types of students that they've had come in through the time that they were in admissions, they could definitely speak to the idea how things are different. It can be different 5 years from now in terms of how we read applications, and how there are some schools who to this day or this year are making the transition from paper-based admissions to reading
That's true.
online.
Yeah.
And so things consistently change. So us as admissions officers, we're consistently being trained, and generally speaking, we're doing trainings every year before we set forth into the reading cycle. One, as a way for us to just kind of like refresh ourselves from things that have happened last year, along with kind of like new things that might be happening in the admissions industry, but also in talking about things like this and understanding what are those different things that we look for within students and within our reading systems. And different schools have different reading systems as well. The idea of just how are we making sure that we're looking for these different things within students. So that involves kind of like creating kind of like sample case studies, which again is definitely a part of kind of like new admissions officers training as they're coming in, but also for us as well, because again we just, as we're looking at different systems or different tweaks to the applications process, we kind of have to orient these type of things within the new system in which we're reading, to make sure we're kind of like keeping all of our bases covered in terms of making sure we're giving all those students a fair shot within our application process.
Yeah, that's good, and I think that's something that our listeners needed to hear. An example of this, of course, is community-based evaluation is something that many campuses are adopting, a whole new reading method that you never really heard much about at all before. What, maybe 5 years ago, right? And so it's an ongoing education process for admission officers. So is the training done, from your experience, by like another admission officer who's studied it more than the rest of the staff, or are you finding, some of the academics are coming in and doing some of the training?
I've actually seen it on both ends. I think it is a benefit to have an admissions officer who is aware of this work and able to kind of like set this framework for admissions officers as they're doing that. But some schools don't have the setup or the resources, or they have, their office is not set up in a way that they have a person within their office that is aware of this. So sometimes you have to bring help from the outside. If you have that knowledge on your campus, it's definitely helpful, because then you can have, admission those faculty members be able to come in and provide this framework and understanding to faculty. I've seen it on both ends, both during my time at Stanford as well as here at Macalester, where we would bring both people internally to the campus, internally to our team, and people external to the campus and the team to come in to help kind of like provide that framework. Because I think sometimes if I were, an admissions director, that, I think I would imagine that sometimes my staff could run tired of me giving the same presentation year after year after year. So sometimes it's just helpful to bring that different voice in to be able to, just kind of like, just give that different perspective about the kind of like the same kind of like value that we might have as an office.
That's great. Now, I was reading some of Sid Lasic's research, and he was talking about non-cognitive variable questionnaire. Is that something that any schools are utilizing at all in the admission process, an actual questionnaire, or is that more background, information more for training?
I would probably say it's a background more for training, and I would say using the questionnaire itself is not something that I've had in my experience, but I do know in my research of non-cognitive variables that I know that there are some people that have kind of like seen that questionnaire as an example of maybe why we don't need to use non-cognitive variables, and the understanding that they just felt like it just wasn't giving enough information to say that it's going to move the needle forward in some way. So I think that, you have people on both sides of the the discussion when it comes to non-cognitive variables. But I think that if you are an institution that is really valuing wanting to continue to diversify your student body and continue to be able to, I think, be inclusive of the different types of students that can apply for admissions to your school, that it's important to have non-cognitive variables as a part of your knowledge base.
So take the other side. Let's say I was having a debate and you were on one side as an advocate of non-cognitive variables, and let's say there was a detractor over beside you, and they're saying this is malarkey, this is a bunch of bunk. Well, what would be their arguments against using non-cognitive variables? Would they just say that's too subjective?
Yeah, and I think they would say that again, that how are you doing this, and are you selecting students just off of this information alone versus the academic offerings? Because I think some people at the end of the day also want their school to bring the strongest students so that they have the most robust kind of like academic experience that they have. That's an argument that is out there, and just maybe just feeling that they're again not seeing the information is not conclusive enough in saying that this is the way in order to make a more diverse student body. That is not a silver bullet. So therefore, how do we pour so much into it that there might still be a need for testing and being able to try to identify or find that correlation between a student's ability to be able to come and be successful academically on our college campuses. I've seen that be the case on the other side.
Yeah, and one of the groups in LASIK's research was women. He felt this was helpful for it. That's 50, not just 50% of the population, as you know, more than 50% of the population on most college campuses. Do you know why why this would be beneficial for women?
Well, yeah, I think that for some women, that I think that they might be coming from context where they are not selected to be the leader of this student group, or they might be coming from context where their chances to be able to become maybe like student body president or something like that, they might be dealing with some things within their context that makes it difficult for them to rise to those places. And for students that might be coming from these contexts, that again, that they are, in need of kind of like, they benefit from, I think, an admissions office or an admissions environment or an industry in which can understand where they might be successful in the absence of, some of those more traditional markers that you might see in that context in which they're coming from.
I actually think that was a great example that you shared, and I'll tell you why. Worked with a number of women who are not necessarily the first class to integrate, going from, not racially, but gender, like going from all male schools to co-ed schools. In fact, the whole book was written on about St. Paul's, a book called Black Ice, and fantastic book. And the author is escaping me now, even that I've spent time with her. But she was part of the second class of women at St. Paul's to go co-ed, and talking about the type of barriers that she encountered. And I've seen that in many other schools whose names I won't mention, but that's an example, because it would be very difficult to emerge in certain leadership positions because of sort of historical norms that were in place. Yeah, that's great. I like that.
Next week in the news, Temple University settles suit over fudged data on MBA rankings. And we'll be in chapter 70 of 171 answers. How can I keep a weakness in my application from leading to an automatic denial? And next week's question asks Mark's advice on which rankings they should pay attention to, even though we know Mark does not love the rankings. And Mark wraps up his interview with Mr. Yancie Davis in the final part of using non-cognitive variables in the admissions process.
Anika, I had to practice what I preached. You know how I tell people, if you're going to live off campus, like live close to campus? You remember me saying that? So, so Karis was on campus for 2 years at Davidson, then off for 2, but she could walk. She was within a mile. And she just got off on a technicality. Now Joy, first 2 years on campus, Now next
Really?
2 are off. And so, of course, she said, yeah. So we were at University of Georgia yesterday, and I ended up committing to a lease for her to stay in an apartment. And that darn thing cost me a fortune because because once you stay close to campus, supply and demand, right? So she could have gone out into the hinterlands and had that long commute and all that. But I said, I thought about all the people I tell, stay close to campus. So I had to drop into the pocket. I'm a poor man over here, but she has got some nice digs. I tell you what, you should see the hookup she's at. Make you want to go back to college, living large. Living large. No, I'm sending you pictures. I'm telling you, this place is okay. You should see all this stuff. Okay, guess what they do? One of the things that they do 4 times a month. It's 95% college students in this place, right? It's 95% all college students. And of course, everything's all furnished with all that stuff, high-speed internet, flat screens, all that. Set bar. It's like a 5-star hotel in the lobby. And they've got the pools and the basketball courts and the squash, and they got all those amenities. And then 4 times a month, they throw food parties for the college kids. And so they just threw like this Olive Garden extravaganza for yes.
Well, well, you're paying for it, so I guess they should. A little Red Lobster.
I'm just paying for it. I'm paying a lot for it.
Wow. Good dad. It's all for the cause. All for the cause,
hey,
Daddy.
I didn't want her lonely out in the middle of nowhere, 20 minutes away from campus, so it's all good. It is all good. It's only money, and
that's right.
She'll have memories.
She'll pay you back later,
good.
maybe.
But, well, she's so grateful. She's like, Dad, you don't have to spend this much. You really don't. So, when your kid's like that, it makes you want to do it even more.
Yeah, she's unpacking, smiling, darn near laughing.
The research is clear. Students that live on campus or close to campus do better academically. So while my pocketbook is feeling some pain, truthfully, I am so exuberant for my daughter Joy.
Oh, it's all good. It is all good.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.